Welcome to Injured and Informed with Jake McKenzie.
Welcome to Injured and Informed with Jake McKenzie. Jake is a Charleston-based attorney whose practice focuses on helping injured South Carolinians seek full justice after car wrecks, on-the-job injuries, and unsafe property conditions. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about what to do after a car wreck in South Carolina and how simple steps right after the crash can protect your case down the road. Jake, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Evan. Good to be here.
Awesome stuff. Jake, before we dive into the legal side, can you share a little bit about your background and what led you to focus your career on helping injured people in the state of South Carolina?
Yeah, I'm originally from Alexandria, Virginia. More specifically, I grew up about a mile from George Washington's estate in Mount Vernon and went to public school my whole life, went to public high school at Mount Vernon High School. Lifelong lover of sports, played three sports in high school. And I've been down in South Carolina for about 11 years now, and I love it here. I got a bunch of family connections in North and South Carolina, so it's been a very natural fit for me down here in Charleston.
I love it. I love it. When someone's been in a car wreck, Jake, and I'm sure emotions are high. People, especially if people are injured, what's the first thing they should do in those first few minutes after that crash?
Well, first of all, your health and safety is paramount. If you're severely injured, you need to get medical attention very quickly. So your first thing you should do is call 911. Assuming you're able to do that. Sometimes, we see catastrophic cases where folks are very, very severely injured in the aftermath of a car wreck. So depending on how injured you are, your first instinct should be call 911. And the two things with that. Number one, you'll get the medical care and the emergency response that you need for your injuries. Number two, it will initiate the police and officers coming to the scene of the wreck to investigate. And that's always a very good thing to have. The next thing you should do is document the scene of the wreck. So you need to take pictures. You want pictures that will be closer in, that will show the details of the property damage. You'd also want to have pictures that kind of show the whole car in the photo image so that we can get a good picture as to what this happened. That also helps us piece together how the wreck happened. And the fourth thing you should do is you should talk to the other involved vehicle. And any witnesses. And you should talk to the person who is involved. Typically, it's going to be the person that hits you. It's going to be their fault. You want to talk to them, ask them what happened, and you also want to get information from them. So in any car wreck that happens in South Carolina, the drivers have a duty to exchange information. So and also in South Carolina, like every other state, there's in exchange for the privilege to drive and avail yourself of the use of the public roadways and private roadways, you agree to carry liability insurance of $25,000 per individual, $50,000 for that's bodily injury, 50 not to exceed $50,000 for the entire car, and then $25,000 in property damage. Now, those are the minimum limits. You can go beyond that, which I would recommend doing. A lot of people do. So there should be liability coverage there. And that is also a key piece of information that you'll want to get from the other side. Now, any officer who comes and investigates the wreck, they'll get that information. That's another good reason to have the police come. Is that they'll get the information from the other driver, name, address, other key information like who their liability insurance carrier is.
So, Jake, at what point does it make sense to call a lawyer? And what difference does it have having an attorney early on actually making how the claims plays out?
Anytime you're injured or think that you may be injured, you should have an attorney help you out. With property damage, it's not as as big of a deal, especially if liability is accepted. You call the adjuster, they will work to get your car fixed. And these types of transactions happen millions of times a day. It's a very efficient market. We know how much that bumper costs, we know how much that headlight costs, etc. You don't get any pain and suffering, obviously, with a property damage to your vehicle. That's just an object. That's not a human body. But your human safety and your health and your body, that there's nothing more important than that. And the law takes that into account. So anytime you are injured, you should have an attorney help you out with your claim. Another thing is that sometimes folks, in the aftermath of a wreck, your adrenaline's pumping and you may not feel all that injured. It's very common for it to take a couple of days for those injuries to manifest. And folks that play sports, contact sports, can tell you, the next day or two, you'll often feel a lot worse than you did moments after the collision happens. So, and that makes sense. But anytime there's a bodily injury involved, you really do need to get a lawyer to protect your rights and to and in many cases help you get the treatment that you need to get you back to being healthy again.
Yeah, Jake. So, like, insurance companies sometimes try to minimize what happened. How do they typically do that? And what should people watch out for in those first few phone calls when they're trying to talk to these insurance companies?
Well, I think you gotta, obviously, I think, you want to be honest, right?
Yeah.
And you want to just stick to the facts. You don't need to, it's not your time to shine in terms of, tell us your whole life story and
Right.
this and that. No, you got to stick to the facts is what I always tell people. So, one way that insurance companies may try to minimize your claim is when they get you on the phone, they're gonna go into asking you if you're hurt or not.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, folks might say, again, in the aftermath of a wreck, your adrenaline's pumping. The police officer may be there and ask if you're hurt. And you might say, no, I'm fine. But, the next day you got a crushing headache or your neck's really stiff or your back is killing you. That can happen oftentimes. So, I think the best way to approach that is if they ask you about your injuries, it's the wreck just happened. You don't know. All you know is I'm shaken up. And that's the truth, right? I mean, you can say, well, gosh, right now I'm shaken up. I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to feel tomorrow or the next
Mhm.
day. But I'll keep you posted on that. So
Mhm.
that's, you're telling the truth in that case, but you're also keeping it open that, your condition can worsen, especially after like a traumatic event, like a car wreck. Nobody's going to fight with you too much in the after trauma when you're the victim of a traumatic event like a car wreck. So that's how the insurance companies will often try to minimize your claim and your bodily injury claim specifically. Another thing is that there are these so-called missed cases, minor impact, soft tissue cases. If you're in a minor collision, but it's an older lady and she hits her head on the steering wheel and she's got a fracture in her neck. I mean, the law says she's entitled to recover for full damages. The law doesn't say, oh, well, that must not have done much damage. No, if it does, it does. So, but that's another way that the insurance companies will try to minimize. They say, "Oh, come on, there's just minor damage there," and that's another way that you couldn't have been that injured. How could you have been injured in a minor collision like that? But at the end of the day, these are multi-ton vehicles in many cases. I mean, even if they're going 25 miles an hour, can be a pretty severe collision.
But Jake, what about, the medical care, after an accident? What should people know about documenting their injuries and maybe following through with that treatment so it actually supports that claim later with that, that medical documentation?
Well, I think that you need to go get medical treatment. If you're in pain, if you're shaken up, it's perfectly reasonable to go get medical treatment. Depending on the severity, some people go to the emergency room. Other folks may go to urgent care. Sometimes if it's folks feel okay that day, they may go the next day or a couple of days after. And then after that, typically any urgent care or emergency room physician was going to tell you to follow up with your primary care doctor if you have one. But in our society, it's just a fact of life that a lot of people don't have health insurance.
Hmm.
And how do you get you didn't do anything wrong to cause this wreck and someone hurt you and you don't happen to have health insurance. Well, what do you do in that case? Well, oftentimes your attorney can facilitate treatment. And if you have a licensed attorney representing you and fighting for you, he or she can facilitate your treatment. Typically, what will happen in that case is you don't have health insurance. The doctor or the medical provider is not going to bill you as you treat, because many times you might treat for 6 months, depending on maybe a year. I mean, some folks have to get surgery, et cetera. And so what will happen is the doctor or the medical provider's bills and their treatment will be protected out of the settlement proceeds. So that would be something that you resolve after the case is settled or has gone to trial and the jury's rendered their verdict. Um,
Mm. So,
that's how that can work. So even if you don't have health insurance,
yeah.
there's still medical treatment that you can receive.
So if for the people at home, I don't think they know, or some people do know that South Carolina is an out at fault state. How does that system work in maybe practical terms, and what does it mean for someone who might be partly responsible for the crash?
So yes, South Carolina is an at-fault state. So that means that, like I said earlier, everybody's got to carry minimum liability limits. Liability insurance is for everyone else's benefit. If I screw up, you also have first-party insurance that's for your benefit, like uninsured motorist coverage if someone's driving like they're not supposed to without liability coverage,
Mhm.
or if your injuries supersede the coverage on the liability policy, you can also get underinsured motorist coverage that would cover those damages. But the at fault aspect just means that whoever causes the wreck is 100% responsible.
Okay.
I think in other states, I'm only licensed in South Carolina, but I think in other states you might have a modified rule where if it's less than $10,000,
Right.
your first party insurance will pay for that. Not in South Carolina. I think that's a good thing because we hold people accountable in South Carolina.
Absolutely.
If you screw up, you're not being careful, and you hurt somebody, you're going to be on the hook for 100% of those damages. But what does happen sometimes is there's something called comparative fault. So, let's say there was a drunk driver who ran a red light and hit you, but that or you're stopped at a red light and a drunk driver hits you in the rear, just crashes into you. That's clear liability. I mean, your vehicle's not even moving. But let's say you're driving down the road, you decide to switch lanes. Another guy enters the roadway when they're not supposed to, when it's unsafe. And then, like and there's a collision, there's a situation like that, there may be some comparative aspects. So maybe they're 80% at fault, or maybe you're 25% at fault. And the way that works in South Carolina is we're a modified comparative negligence state. So that means at court, if you're more than 50% responsible for the wreck, you can't recover anything. Okay, so you can't get anything, and That's a logical thing in the law. I mean, you can't sue yourself, right? And so like, and they're only responsible for what they cause. So the way that would work is if I'm 25% responsible for my injuries and the other party 75% responsible, and let's say the jury comes back and awards $10,000, then my recovery would be reduced by 25%. So instead of 10,000, I would get 7,500. But again, if I'm more than, and so on and so forth, but if I'm more than 50% at fault, I'm more at fault than the other guy. Let's say you don't get anything. You don't get anything. So I hope that answers.
It does. It does. So Jake, like, can you walk us through what happens once someone hires your firm and that first call goes through, and when their case and how it starts moving forward? What's that process like?
Well, your odds are you're going to talk directly with me. I'm going to be the one who will answer the phone call and talk to you, much like I'm talking to you today, Evan. And we will. I'll discuss the case with you. And I usually, in that first initial call, I like to spend a good 30 minutes or so talking to you. I mean, at the end of the day, we're human beings,
Right.
and we have our own set of experiences and diverse backgrounds, and it's important to give people the time of day. And I think that people want to be heard, and I think that helps their case. If your attorney is going to take the time to talk to you, hear you out, that's going to be better for your case, because it's not just your medical bills. Anybody can just sit up there and sum up, the medical bills. You also have your pain and suffering and what's called general damages. So your general damages are things like, I missed my daughter's recital, or I missed my son's football game, or we had a vacation planned to the beach and we had to cancel it because the mom got in a car wreck and broke her ankle or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So all those things, trouble sleeping at night, difficulty doing things around the house. If you're married, that can affect your relationship with your spouse. So I try to get the whole complete picture, so I'll talk to them about their, how did the wreck happen? I get some background information. Also learning about really the impacts that it's been having on their life. And then I help them, I give them advice like any good lawyer would. And, I want to convey that, I'm there on their side. I'm going to be fighting for them, and no one's going to work harder than me to protect their rights.
Absolutely. And Jake, finally, for anyone listening who's just been in that wreck and feels overwhelmed, what's the simplest piece of advice you'd want them to remember as they start putting those pieces back together?
Stick to the facts, be honest, take pictures, and document the wreck, and also start early on thinking about how this wreck has impacted your life, your daily life, your relationships. All of that stuff gets counted into your damages. So it's important to think about those things early on.
Great stuff. Beautiful. Jake, thank you so much.
Thanks, Evan.
All right. That's it for today's episode of Injured and Informed with Jake McKenzie. If you'd like to learn more about the law office of Jacob C. McKenzie and how Jake helps injured clients across South Carolina pursue full justice, visit jakemckenzielawfirm.com. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review if you found this episode helpful. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.